Realized I don't have any intro music for this podcast yet. So if you all have any suggestions for what you want to hear, please let me know. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, you can comment down, or if you want to send me an email, you can send me hit me up on crimsonmiserypod@gmail.com. And yeah, I was thinking maybe I could do like a guitar solo for the intro. I do play guitar and bass, so if you all want to see any of my musical talents along with my obvious expert analysis on college basketball, please let me know. And without further ado, let's just get into it. I am Will Rainbow. This is the Crimson Misery Podcast, episode one. I know there's technically another episode that I did before this, but that was labeled episode zero for a reason. That was just the introduction without any analysis, and it was very short. So only like 13 minutes long, 12, 13. I can't exactly remember, but yeah, these episodes are going to be way longer than that. Hopefully not too terribly long, but also long enough to where it's actual like podcast length and people can sit down for a while and just listen to this 23-year-old kid ramble on college basketball. So, without further ado, if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe, like the video. If you're listening on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast, I know you all love to hear a lot of flubbed lines. But if you're listening on Spotify or if wherever you listen to your podcasts, rate 5 stars because they're following the podcast. Again, I don't have a Patreon or a membership option for you all. This isn't a payment stream or a payment podcast, but if that's something you all want, and if I get enough followers, just please let me know if that's what you want, and I will do it. So anyway, let's get right into it. So currently, today it is November 15th. It is just past 4 o'clock, and there are some games happening today on both the men's and women's side. And currently on the men's side, no one is really playing. Currently, the first option that pops up is VMI versus Tennessee Tech. Great showdown. You can watch live on PTB Live, whatever that is. And the first game of note is Florida at Florida State. I look for any Florida fans out there. I'm sorry that you probably heard a lot about Todd Golden in recent days, the whole stalking and harassment Title IX lawsuit that he's currently facing, allegedly um, has been stalking female Florida students. And if it turns out those allegations are true, and apparently from the reports that I've read from different outlets, and especially the Florida student newspaper that really broke the story. Again, this is why you should support a lot of student journalism work as someone who has, been part of that as well. Not maybe not to the extent that, these students have been in, but to break a story like that. And I especially remember the Northwestern football Pat Fitzgerald story that, broke. Please support student journalism. And that's that's what I will say on that, because without them, this story probably would have taken a lot longer to break, and that this cloud is hanging over Florida season right now. What was a program that was on the rise up, obviously, not to the extent of the Billy Donovan era or even in the early Mike White era where they went to the Elite Eight. This Florida team last year made the NCAA tournament, lost, I believe it was 102 to 100 against Colorado in the round of 64, but you could still see a lot of promise with that Florida team. And they were one of my like big sleeper teams coming into this year. And now we have Todd Golden's Title IX incident that is making this a very dark cloud over the season. And rightfully so. I think if it turns out to be true, Todd Golden should not be coaching anywhere near like college athletics or anywhere, because that some of the I don't want to give away all of the information because I'm not like the most versed in it, but if the allegations turn out to be true, then he is an absolutely disgusting person, and I don't feel any shame saying that. Uh it's just a really messed up situation. And with Florida fans, especially giving him a standing ovation in his first game back since this article dropped, it's it has been really it irks me to see, and especially when we don't exactly know what happens and where this is going to lead up. I think Florida students, and especially those who attended the basketball game, should be very much reconsidering doing something like that. And yeah, so again, I don't know what exactly is going to happen from here on out with Florida, and I don't really a lot of it's going to come down to whether what ends up happening with Todd Golden. Uh and Florida State, they're going to be playing at Florida State, a rivalry game. I'm expecting a lot of boos to come from the Florida State student section and a lot of the fans there, as per usual, but more so this time around. And for Florida State, this game means a lot, especially in an ACC this year that isn't very good aside from Duke and North Carolina. This is an opportunity for Florida State to really make a statement. And I, I just because Florida State also doesn't have the best strength of schedule, especially in like non-conference season. So you obviously have I believe Florida State has UMass and Temple coming up. Temple is undefeated, I believe, and that's also a pretty good opportunity to get some sort of non-conference strength, but this is pretty big for a Florida State team that I feel like if they are able to run the table in the non-conference season, they could possibly make a pretty good run for the at least in the top four in the ACC. I obviously we're going to see what Louisville and Notre Dame potentially do. I know um, Micah Shrewsbury for Notre Dame is looking to get his team back on track, and obviously you have Pat Kelsey at Louisville, looking to kind of rebuild from the dreadful Kenny Payne era. And I know Louisville plays Indiana uh, fairly soon. I believe it's next week. So that's going to be an opportunity for the ACC to be really good. Wake Forest, another team that a lot of people could be sleeping on. Obviously, Syracuse has played a couple of pretty close games in recent days, especially Colgate. So I don't know if Syracuse is going to be all that good, but we'll see. I mean, Duke and North Carolina are the two, I think, clear best teams in the ACC, which is, again, not really a surprise, but also this is just how it goes. I mean, North Carolina played Kansas really close at Fog Allen, and we'll see if North Carolina can really like keep up the momentum from getting a one seed last year. And I think they can in again a relatively weak ACC, unless some teams come out of the woodwork to surprise me. I mean, Pittsburgh could be another team, but again, we don't know. So again, this is a pretty big game for Florida State to really establish something. And again, like I said, if they can run the table in their non-conference slate, and it starts tonight with beating Florida, that could go a long way for the Seminoles to do something. Um, but obviously, the big game of the day for men's basketball, we'll be getting into women's basketball in a little bit, but Alabama at Purdue, Mackey Arena, West Lafayette on Peacock at 7 p.m. Number 2 Alabama, 13 Purdue. The big thing, obviously, for Purdue is that their freshman center, Daniel Jacobson, 7'4". Matt Painter just continues to grow 7'4" centers on trees. And they just like, they keep popular. Like, I don't know how Matt Painter does this. It's like always. I'm surprised they didn't get. I mean, speaking of Florida, I mean, I'm surprised he wasn't able to get Oliver Ryu. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. I apologize, but I mean, he just he keeps doing it. He can't keep getting away with this, Matt Painter. No, but I have to say, like from fellow students at Indiana, where I went to college, where I graduated. I've always been a huge fan of Indiana. I have never been able to hate Matt Painter. He is just a very likable human being, and he's I mean, again, he's a terrific coach. Regardless of what his tournament shortcomings, I mean, a lot of it was outdone last year when he went to the national title game and lost to UConn. But from everything I've heard from fellow IU students and just anyone who's met Matt Painter, just says he's a wonderful guy who will like remember your name whenever you run into him for like a second time. And it's just that's like a great attribute as a head coach. And I've just never been able to hate Matt Painter as much as, some other Big Ten head coaches and other head coaches in college basketball, which I will definitely be getting into that a little bit more. But again, Daniel Jacobson out for the year with a tibia injury. That just sounds so painful, and I feel so bad for him. I mean, they're thinking maybe Wilberg can step up, who's like another 7-15 or something like that. But yeah, they're still. I think Purdue's going to be fine. Again, I don't think this injury, even though it obviously sucks and it limits their front court depth, I don't think this is going to be the end all be all for Purdue. And if you're Alabama, there's still a lot to be concerned about because they haven't necessarily played all that well. I mean, they're undefeated, but they've played some pretty close games. And again, obviously with Grant Nelson and Mark Sears, they they will obviously, and Cliff Amori, the transfer from Rutgers. I'm very glad he's out of the Big Ten because he was such a menace to play against, yeah, especially because Indiana sucks against Rutgers every year. But with that being said, I think if I had to pick a winner in this game, I think it is Purdue just because it's at Mackey. Usually all the momentum is with Purdue when it comes to just that home court because it is so loud and it is everyone is just so in your face. It is so menacing. I would just hate to play there as an opposing player. And I know Purdue had a close one against Yale, but at the same time, I just think they're going to be really prepared for this one, and I think they just have the edge. In and we'll see in a few hours what ends up happening, but that's my prediction. I think Purdue will win by a final of 84-78. That is my prediction. And kind of at a larger point, especially because we're talking about Purdue and I guess to a larger extent the Big Ten in general. I know Illinois has a couple of really good freshmen, including Will Riley. Shout out to players who have the same name as I do. You get an extra bonus point in that case. But you have Purdue, you have Indiana, you have Rutgers with freshmen like Ace Bailey, who are primed to make a pretty good run. You have Michigan retooling with Dusty May. Michigan State can always make some noise. And aside from that, it is really difficult to see what teams are really gonna like make a huge impact on this season. I was watching the USC UT Arlington game a couple nights ago, and that was a pretty close one. USC, jeez, and obviously you have Minnesota losing to North Texas, so they're the Big Ten may be a pretty top heavy league this year. And with that being said, this is also something that gives me hope for Indiana in case they have some sort of lapse in their non-conference season, especially when it comes to the Battle for Atlantis tournament. I think that Indiana has a pretty good chance to, at least for the bottom part of the league, run the table in terms of an on-paper talent evaluation. I think Indiana has got a lot to be excited for and a lot of confidence that they can prove that they can win in this conference that doesn't have a ton of great teams in there. If I did have to pick a Big Ten regular season champion, I you all know what my answer would be in that case. it would be Indiana. That's what I want to say, but I think it's Purdue. I just I can't go against what Matt Painter's doing. I can't go against their guards and Fletcher Lawyer and Camden Heide and Braden Smith and all those guys, especially even considering the loss of Zach Edey, the transfer of Mason Gillis to Duke. I just don't see Purdue letting up. I don't. And I think as of right now, Indiana and Purdue are 1 and 2 in the Big Ten, and that could very well change depending on injuries. And maybe Daniel Jacobson's injury is plays a bigger impact, and it throws their offense out of sync and everything. And again, as I mentioned earlier, their front court depth is obviously going to be challenged. I still think they're going to be fine. I still think they're going to be fine. And I just don't see Indiana topping Purdue in this league. I don't. If I had to in a 20 game schedule, I predict Purdue 16-4, Indiana 15-5. That's my prediction. I think Purdue wins it by about a game, maybe two. And again, it's tough to say because I obviously want, you know, uh Purdue I obviously want Indiana to win, but again, we'll see what happens next. So anyway, so moving on from that, we have a couple more games tipping off around the 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock hour. Cincinnati taking on Nickel State. That's a team that could definitely challenge Kansas in the Big 12. Maybe Iowa State in the Big 12 as well. You never know. Baylor as well. And speaking of North Carolina, you have North Carolina playing American. That is the not the biggest game a North Carolina basketball team will be playing today, though. So we'll get to that in a minute because women's basketball does exist. And you have Marquette taking on Maryland in a Big Ten Big East showdown. Is that part of the Gavitt games? For some reason, I feel like that is still happening, but I can't like my brain is just so fogged up. I can't like. Okay, let me look this up. This is what you should be doing for if you're a podcaster. You need to prepare. Will seriously, you need to prepare for your podcasts and again, but I feel like I have prepared, quite a bit. So like obviously this is just okay, no, the final year of the series was 2023. So no, this isn't part of the Gavitt tip-off games. I thought it was, but no, this is just a non-conference regular game apparently. Marquette and at Maryland. And we'll see. I think I'm not quite sure how good Maryland is going to be. I obviously think that Julian Reese might have a pretty big year depending on, you know, how much he has stepped up. But aside from that, I just am not sure like how they're gonna, how they're gonna fare in this Big Ten conference. And obviously I'm rooting, for my guy Jordan Geronimo uh, at Maryland, former Indiana player who I had such high hopes for to be like the next Victor Oladipo or like OG Anunoby, but unfortunately, some guys just don't pan out, and that's the nature of college basketball. But obviously, with Marquette competing in the Big East, it's gonna again like I was saying for the Big Ten, this is gonna be a very very top heavy league, and you obviously have UConn. You obviously have Creighton with, oh my God, Ryan Kalkbrenner has just been unreal to watch. And he's, he's, I mean, people may say something like, Alex Caravan or whatever. Like, Ryan Kalkbrenner is right now the Big East Player of the Year. And unless, you know, barring any sort of injury or fall off, Ryan Kalkbrenner is the Player of the Year in the Big East. I don't think that's even up for debate at this point. But you have them, you have St. John's looking to compete, you have Marquette, possibly a team like Providence could step up, Xavier potentially with Sean Miller. Um, but you've had some pretty big disappointments. Seton Hall, whoo, buddy, Seton Hall and Shaheen Holloway. What the hell? I Man, I'm telling you right now, if they lose to Wagner, it's over. It's Jover, as some might say. I mean, they barely beat St. Peter's, Holloway's former head coaching gig, but then they lose to Fordham and Hofstra. They haven't scored 60 points yet. That is crazy. What the hell? And they've scored 48 points at home against Hofstra. What are you doing? That is remarkable. I don't remember a again, and maybe it's just memory failing me, but I can't remember a team, especially playing your quote unquote cupcake schedule, to not score 60 points in any of your non-conference regular season games. They've played 3 games. they've they've scored 57, 56, and 48. That's it. Well, that is embarrassing. I'm sorry for any Seton Hall fans watching, but it might be a tough year for you all. I'm very sorry. But on that same breath, Villanova is also just been really, really struggling, and they lost to Columbia at home by 10, and then they lose at St. Joseph's. The St. Joseph's loss, I can understand. That sort of loss does happen occasionally, but losing at home to Columbia is a big red flag. And don't I just don't see I just don't see Villanova really climbing either. I know Kyle Neptune's job is a bit I've seen some people really calling for Kyle Neptune's job. We'll see. I don't think it's in true danger yet, but at the same time, we'll see. I mean, I've been wrong before. They play Virginia today at home. Virginia, obviously, their first season without Tony Bennett as their head coach, and we'll see what happens. UMass Lowell's facing Gonzaga. I mean, what do I really say there? Gonzaga's just really good, and I mean they should beat UMass Lowell, but we'll see. Arizona, Wisconsin. This is going to be an interesting game. A rematch of the 2014-15 Elite Eights, where Wisconsin, obviously, with Frank Kaminsky and Sam Decker and Trayvon Jackson, and Arizona when they had current pacer T.J. McConnell and Caleb Tarzewski and Brandon Ashley, Nick Johnson, all those guys. This this will be an interesting game because Wisconsin has not been very impressive. I know it's at home. I mean, they were trailing for a while against Holy Cross, but then they ended up winning. Wisconsin's another team that might, surprise some people. Again, last year I know they flamed out against, James Madison. They had AJ Store transfer. They had a couple of their your better players, graduate. So we'll see what ends up happening for Wisconsin. But this is a pretty big game to see if they really get on the map. And for Arizona to get a road win this early in the year for Tommy Lloyd, this could be a pretty big game. So again, this is the game after the Purdue Alabama game on Peacock. So it's we'll see what ends up happening. But the final game of note is Ohio State and Texas A&M. I didn't mention Ohio State earlier because they've flown under the radar a little bit in the Big Ten. Um, but Jake Diebler's guys have been really good. I again, they've just sort of flown under the radar. I didn't really think about them too much as like a Big Ten contender, admittedly, and that might be on me. I got to put some respect on Ohio State, especially because I do think they're going to beat Texas A&M. I don't think Texas A&M should be ranked, frankly. Especially after losing to UCF, I don't think they should be 23rd because they were 23rd when they lost to UCF. So I don't think they should be ranked. And I know it's at home against for Texas A&M at Reed Arena. I just think Ohio State is better like overall, and that would be my pick to win is Ohio State. And Bruce Thornton obviously is a guy that it feels like he's been there for 10 years now. Still not as long as how long Aaron Kraft was at Ohio State for like 20 years, but That being said, again, I apologize to any Buckeye fans listening for not mentioning Ohio State earlier, and I submit my apology form to you all, um, because they just completely slipped my mind. Reason for that, and which is what I wanted to get into next, is just because of the recent influx of the Pac-12 Big Ten teams, and oh my gosh, again, I've already mentioned USC. Haven't mentioned any of the others just because I don't really see any of them making some noise in the Big Ten this year. I mean, women's basketball is a much different story, and especially when it comes to UCLA and USC, and especially because UCLA lost to New Mexico at home, which was a very no, it wasn't at home. It was at least Family Forum. Okay, that I thought it said it was at Poly. Okay, never mind. But it still, you obviously don't really want to have a loss this early to a team like New Mexico, even though New Mexico is, again, going to be in contention for the Mountain West yet again under Richard Pitino. And my my strange, very strange prediction is that Oregon will win they're going to win the Big Ten tournament because it always seems to happen with Oregon under Dana Altman, where they have this sort of middle of the road year. No one's really talking about them, and then bam, Pac-12 tournament comes and they the win the whole thing and get into the tournament that way. It's happened so many times. It happened in 2013, where I believe they went to the Sweet 16 and lost to Louisville. I believe that's right. Yeah. They were like a 12 seed where they should have been like a 5, but the committee screwed them over despite being Pac-12 tournament champions and being ranked. But that also happened a few other times. I believe it happened in 2019, and where that was I think that was the year where people were saying that it'd be like a one bid league and it'd be Washington, but then Oregon ended up winning the Pac 12 and then they ended up getting in as well. And then the committee picked Arizona State over Indiana, which I'm still very upset about. But again, that was the Archie Miller era, so it gets an exception. That gets a special exception. Anything that happened in the Archie Miller era, I just pretend didn't happen. So, anywho, I just Oregon always finds a way to do this. Like, no matter how, really applying myself to the Gen Z crowd here, how mid Arizona can possibly, or Arizona, Oregon, wrong Pac 12 team, buddy, Oregon is, or how, just they limp into the Pac 12 tournament and then they just reel it off. And I guess Dana Altman has just some sort of it's weird. It's like that Simpsons iconic Simpsons meme, that clip where Mo is like tossing out all the patrons and he tosses out Barney and then he's like then Barney appears behind him. That's exactly what's happening here. It's like the Pac-12 tosses out Oregon or he tosses out Dana Altman and then he just appears behind you in the Big Ten like I'm back. That's a terrible Barney. I can't do a Barney impression from The Simpsons. Um, we want Chili Willy. We want Chili Willy. Um, if any voice actors want to do anything for me, let me know because that was painful. So, anywho, that's the Big Ten. I mean, the SEC. I mentioned a little bit. Obviously, Kentucky looking to, really made a statement against Duke in the Champions Classic. I mentioned that beforehand. Obviously, Alabama is going to be you're right up there as I mean, obviously preseason um, Southeastern Conference champions, and I mean Auburn obviously as well, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and it's another team with Zakai Ziegler. he may be their whole team, but he's really damn good. I know Indiana beat them in the preseason exhibition game, but I still think Tennessee, for as much as they lost in the last year, obviously with Dalton Knecht going to the NBA and Jonas Adu going to Arkansas, Hunter John Calipari, it's still that's still a team to watch, and I wouldn't take Tennessee lightly. Um, Ole Miss, take them or leave them. I mean, obviously, Ole Miss and Mississippi State are kind of like the same team to me. They're both kind of like Ole Miss is 25, Mississippi State I believe is like right out on the outside of the top 25. But they're just sort of like the same team to me. So it'll be curious to see what ends up happening. Um, Obviously, it goes without saying, but the rankings right now are pretty cool. I mean, Indiana's ranked 16th. They'll play South Carolina tomorrow, Saturday, the 16th. And rankings are nice, but you just want to keep getting better and better throughout the year. And that's just something that I've always had in mind. Like I know rankings can be really cool to look at and say like, oh, my team's in, close to the top 15 or my team's number 1. If you're Kansas, you've had that luxury 2 years now and this time you better capitalize on it or else people are going to make fun of you forever and I hope that happens because screw you Bill Self and screw you Hunter Dickinson. Anyway, no offense to Kansas fans, don't have anything against you all, but especially with those two, just scum. Anyway, so and moving on, let's do a little women's college basketball. Let's get the women some love here. And the game that people are rightfully talking about is the game happening right now against USC and Santa Clara. USC is winning by 31. Why wouldn't they be winning by 31? It just is. It always happens. It always happens. Kiki with 20 points, Juju Watkins with 22, of course. Talia von Olhoffen with 3, but she also has 6 assists, so kind of makes up for it there. I mean, what is there? I mean, this team is going to make the Final Four. I am calling it right now. Oh, no, no. I thought it's at the end of the third quarter. Nope, it's the end of the fourth. USC wins 81 to 50. Okay. The thing wasn't really loading all that well. But with that being said, you also have Murray State at LSU. I mean, LSU is going to win, but like I hope Kim Mulkey gets like ejected or something for like grabbing a referee or just yelling some sort of slur at the at like a player or whatnot. Um, that's the other thing. Um, before I truly move on, mentioning the Big Ten teams and like different Big Ten coaches. So I've already mentioned a few, but I'm going to start a Fran McCaffrey technical foul questionnaire where I'm going to be asking every time I record a podcast, I will ask myself and I will look up whether or not or if I already know the answer to whether or not Fran McCaffrey got a technical foul. So I will be asking, did Fran McCaffrey get a technical foul since the last time I recorded? And I think the over under on that number, especially with the state of Iowa basketball. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. It could be a pretty frustrating year in Iowa City, but I'm gonna put the over under on Fran McCaffrey technical fouls at 3.5. I think that's fair because I don't think he'll get a technical foul like every other game or something. But I also think um, there will be those moments where he just it's that meme, it's that chart that someone made where it's like the FranCon levels instead of DEFCON levels, and it goes up for I think it's no, okay, no, it is right. So usually how DEFCON works is if it's at like a DEFCON 5, it's like minimal uh urgency, And then if it's at DEFCON 1, then it's like the situation's really bad. And obviously people like Kanye West didn't know like what that meant, so he was, in his anti-Semitic, rant, he was like, yeah, DEFCON 3. Yeah, I'm not gonna repeat that, but regardless. Um, yeah, so it's yeah, I'll say, and usually when it's like FranCon 1, it's really bad. So I think even FranCon like 4 or FranCon 3 can get like a technical foul. So yeah, I think 3.5 technical fouls for Fran McCaffrey is a pretty fair mark to go at. Um, I don't. Okay, so yeah, the big game for women's college basketball, North Carolina, UConn. Oh man, that's going to be a game. It'll take place at the Greensboro Coliseum in Greensboro, North Carolina. It'll be on ESPN2 at 6, so in about an hour. So that's man, that is a tough game to decide. But I think UConn will win overall. But this is a big game for North Carolina to really establish themselves after obviously losing to South Carolina in last year's NCAA tournament. Um, and Paige Beckers. I feel bad saying this about Paige Beckers because she's a great player. She's going to have a wonderful, wonderful WNBA career. I think she's going to be. I mean, she's a baller already. She'll continue to be a baller in college and in the WNBA. But with that said, I think she's going to leave titleless. Yeah, I think she's going to leave titleless. And that sucks to say. They came really close in 21-22 when they lost to South Carolina. And then, I mean, she was injured. And yeah, I mean, in 2022-23, she came back last year, made the Final Four. I, I just don't, because either way, you're going to have to get past South Carolina or USC or UCLA or Texas or a number of those teams that are still looking to compete. And can UConn do it this year? Sure. I just don't think they will. It's just something about this team and the way they've played the last few years just doesn't scream title to me. They obviously lost Nico Mull last year. They still have Azzy Fudd, and I, it doesn't. It sucks to say because it doesn't. I mean, it's not like she deserves a title, and it's not like Gino Ariema is like starving for a title. It's like that Holden blood feast meme on like leftist Twitter, and he's like, "Please, I just want to bomb Iran one more time." And like respectful bipartisan. And it's like Gino Ariema. He's like getting up there in age and he's like hooked up. I can imagine Gino Ariema being like hooked up to a wheelchair and being like, please, I just want one more title before I croak. And that's mean to say about Gio Ariema, but who cares? He's won like a billion titles and he's also been coaching like 40 years. So it whatever. It it makes sense for someone like Paige Beckers to get a title, and it may very well happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think it'll be USC in a repeat. Well, USC beating South Carolina. For some reason, I just had that in my head. USC and South Carolina just having the same initials, same acronym is just really confusing. But USC, the actual USC in Los Angeles, I think also might be a pretty good pick to win the national title. I really, if it was between like USC um or UConn or South Carolina, I'd pick USC. Even I don't think UCLA will win, but that's obviously, again, there's a lot of basketball to be played, and they call it March Madness for a reason, is because anything can happen. That includes Indiana, unfortunately, losing to Miami a couple years ago in the round of 32, which I still have not gotten over. And it is a nice segue into this next section where I don't want to talk about Indiana women's basketball too much because it's very depressing, but they're 1-2 on the year. They have lost to Harvard at home, their first loss at Assembly Hall since the Miami game. And then they dropped 46 against Butler in a loss on the road. I was not able to watch any of it because I don't have Flow Sports or whatever it's called. And my dad was actually at the game, and I was I was watching Survivor at that point just because it was just much better television. And oh boy, reading some of his texts. Shout out to my dad. And man, it does not look good. I can understand maybe putting up a good. I mean, Harvard is not a bad basketball team, and some teams in those sort of bye games or cupcake games really don't. Sometimes games like that happen, but then you look at this. Sometimes when you're looking for a bounce back game, you say, okay, well, we lost at home, but we can still you know, get back on track. They did not get back on track, to say the least, and it's really concerning because man, Mackenzie Holmes and Sarah Scalia, they they were so good. They were so damn good. But I didn't think they'd be the main two reasons why Indiana was so successful because that isn't the case. Terry Morin's a great coach and they have plenty of talent. Chloe Moore McNeil, Sydney Parrish, Yarden Garzone, the three returning starters from last year. And then you have Shay Chesky, I believe that's how you pronounce her last name, as like kind of a replacement for Sarah Scalia, and then you have Lily Beister stepping back up as like the. I always compare it to like whenever Jared Bergeron was at Wisconsin, and then you had Frank Kaminsky playing behind him, and then Kaminsky, you know, became like so much better of a player in the 2 years where he was a starter. I thought that was going to be Lily Meister, man, and it just so far hasn't happened, and it is very concerning for this year. Um, I don't obviously believe that Terry Morin should be, you know, I don't think anyone should be calling for her job or anything because she's been the best women's coach in Indiana history, Indiana college basketball history. But man, it's just not looking good. And I mean, admittedly, my, overall enthusiasm for like the Indiana women's team has been, dampened a little bit because of, I don't want to immediately piss off like half my fan base, but especially with, Israel's genocide in Gaza, I think, especially with Yarden Garzone being, from Israel, which, like again, I'm not this isn't me like being like ethnically offensive, but like for her to I mean, I know she's been very outspoken about being like a Zionist and also, and like holding like the team holding like the Israeli flag and everything that so a big part of that has been kind of dampened, and it's just like overall just made me depressed about the world, and like obviously with with a lot of innocent people in Gaza being killed, and it's just really unfortunate. And yeah, so I'm gonna stop myself before I like get emotional or like but anywho, it's just unfortunate, and I hope the team improves. I hope this isn't like the normal for this year's team because it shouldn't be. On paper, I mean, they were ranked 25th to begin the year. And again, there's still plenty of time. This is just 3 games into the season. And we'll see what happens, but it's just not looking all that great. So anyway, I'm pretty sure USC has got this league in the bag. So because unlike, the Big Ten In men's basketball, it's just it's really been an improvement for teams like UCLA and USC to join the Big Ten in women's college basketball, because otherwise it'd probably be a bit more of a just mid tier league. I mean, obviously we'll see what happens with Ohio State women's hoops and how good Michigan can be with Silas Swords if they are able to take that game against South Carolina, the first game of the year, and sort of run with it. If that's something possible that could happen with them, we'll see. And is there anything else? I don't think. I think that's about all I wanted to cover. I want to get this episode out, before the games tip off tonight. Um, so yeah, if if you all but if you all enjoyed watching this episode, please again consider subscribing on YouTube. Consider rating the show 5 stars if you're watching on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, thank you so much for listening. This has been my first overall episode. Technically, this is the first episode with any like sort of analysis or anything, but regardless of that, I appreciate you all so much. Hopefully, this can really take off, and I appreciate you all for listening. So take care of yourself. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and enjoy watching some college basketball tonight, college football tomorrow, maybe. Indiana, Ohio State play next weekend. So that's really exciting for me. And until next time, until I record next, have a wonderful, wonderful time. So thanks again. Bye bye.